Biggest delicious but so. Okay. All right, we're gonna get started. Many of you don't know this gentleman that's on the screen. He's not a physician, but he is a financial advisor. He's actually mine, but I'm not sponsored for this. He was just someone I knew who's good at his job and who is very good at financial planning. But to start out, and I'll introduce him again in a second. But to start out, sorry. First of all, for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Jeannie Lee. I'm currently the president of the San Diego chapter of the American College of Surgeons. If you registered for today, you saw that there was also a link.
We lost you, Jeannie.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Great. So I don't know where I left off, but for those of you who registered for this meeting, we are taking nominees for secretary, treasurer, and president. We will probably announce that next month. So if you are interested or know of anyone who's interested, please sign up or sign them up. So to start the meeting, we're going to start with Dr. Doucette, who is going to give us an update on state advocacy efforts for California.
Thanks, Jeannie. I don't have too much to say. There's no oxygen in the news today beyond the SCOTUS ruling on Roe versus Wade. But a few things that we have been working on just to let you know about. One, AB 2260, which is the Stop the Bleed bill, which would put trauma kits in all AEDs in new construction in California. We found out this morning that that bill was basically put on consent for the last committee in the Senate. So that is going to pass. It's going to go to the Senate next week or the week after. And we anticipate it will be on the governor's desk sometime in July. In the back channels, we found that the governor likes this bill, and so we will be the first state in the United States, very likely, to have a Stop the Bleed equipment bill, and all AEDs in new construction in California will have a Stop the Bleed kit. Actually, 6 Stop the Bleed kits. Some other interesting bills: State Bill 250, which is a prior authorization bill. Dr. Pan, who is the only physician in the California Senate, has been nursing that bill through committees. It looks like it's got a good chance of passing, and that will take away some of the ridiculousness over prior authorization being used for way too many cases. Basically, what it does is physicians who are not been shown to have a record of wasting money or making ridiculous orders will not have to do prior authorization, and you basically renew that credential. So it's basically going to say, yeah, this guy is not crazy, this woman's not crazy. Give them what their patient needs. So that'll be a big thing. There's also a prior authorization bill at the federal level. That's a bicameral, bipartisan bill. Of course, right now in Washington, everything's a little bit crazy, but there is a chance that that bill will pass this year, which would deal with things at a federal level as well. So that could be a big improvement in our future practice without having so many calls for prior authorization from insurance companies who really often just do it just to delay, and delay means profit for them. So we have to fight that. For those of you concerned about the Roe versus Wade thing, we should note that there are several bills in California that basically will negate the effect of that SCOTUS ruling in the state. There's also been placed a state constitutional amendment, which would counts that as a rate. In California, we have a Democratic supermajority, so I anticipate there's at least 8 different bills relating to Roe versus Wade. I anticipate most, if not all, of those bills will pass. So there will be impacts with Roe versus Wade, but they will not be very significant within California. But for those young surgeons talking today, if you don't think that the political system and the court system don't have an impact on your practice, well, remember today. And just because we write papers and do great clinical work doesn't mean we can be passive. We have to advocate for our patients and for ourselves, because in places like Sacramento and Washington, if you're not on the table, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so we have to be advocate for that. So one way you can do that is to contribute to the PAC. Our political action committee is bipartisan, but we do support those candidates that do have a way of improving our patients' care and improving our practices. And so even if you contribute a small amount of money, it still counts for the percentage of donors given. So you can also get involved with advocacy at Surgeon's Voice, which allows you to send letters of support to your representatives in both state and federal bills that will affect us. So any questions, let me know, or drop me an email or text. But without further ado, I'll turn it back to you, Jeannie.
One quick thing before Dr. Lee introduces Forrest, just as a friendly reminder, if everybody can stay on mute so we eliminate any of the background noise, that would be awesome. So thank you very much. Here you go, Dr. Lee.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Dr. Doucette, for that update. So it is my pleasure to introduce Forrest Friedow. He is a financial counselor, advisor. I don't know if there's an official title, but he basically manages money for people who are like us. So for most physicians, we start our retirements probably a lot later than most of the general population, because most of us go through medical school, a long bit of training, and just try to survive financially during training without actually considering what you need to put in for retirement. As well as if you have, if you're thinking about doing a private practice, any of those financial type needs related to your practice at all. So I thought it would be good to bring Forrest on, especially for the trainees who really probably haven't planned or started planning, or maybe have thought about it but don't really know how to get started. He's here to give us a presentation on this, as well as to answer any questions you guys may have about what to do or how to start, or any of those, like any questions related to your finances. So I'm going to hand it over to Forrest.
Thanks, Jeannie. And also, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I also have one of my colleagues, a financial advisor, who works in my practice. Her name is Jen Chatfield. She's joining us from Missouri, which is where my team happens to be located, along with Sarah, I understand. So they're experiencing hot and humid, and we're just experiencing hot. So I wanted to share today just a general presentation about financial planning and what we do for our clients. And then I'm going to go in a little bit further into some of the topics, two in particular, that are sort of top of mind for our clients, particularly clients who have gone out into practice or who are in the operating room and hearing one another talk about some of the unique investment strategies that get presented to surgeons all the time. So with that, I want to give you just a general overview of financial planning. As Jeannie pointed out, we do manage a significant amount of money for our clients, but that is not all we do, and that is not the key thing that we do. It is a significant portion of our business, but the big thing that we do, particularly for physicians who are moving out into practice from either residency or fellowship, or who are new in practice, who have never met with a financial planner, have never taken the time to organize their financial life, their debt, their assets, in many cases a lot more debt than assets when you first come out. We take them through a process. I use the financial planning pyramid as a way to sort of describe the process and how we think about getting started and moving to what we consider financial independence. And Jeannie knows this well. We talk about financial independence all the time at our meetings, and there are steps to reach financial independence. And so as you can see here, we start at the base with people who are in residency, fellowship, people who are moving out into practice. And there are three key areas in the base of the financial planning pyramid. First one is cash management. Most physicians go from making a very modest income for the number of hours that they work. I'm probably not giving that the full oomph, because I know you guys work a lot of hours, and if you were to take that salary and divide it into an hourly rate, it would be very low. In the cash management section, we really talk with people about, okay, you've gone from a resident or fellow salary to an in-practice salary. How do we deal with that? And so we start with building a cash management, a cash profile. How are we going to use cash for paying off debts, for living, all of the different things that you need going forward in your life. In the cash management section, we also talk about emergency reserves and opportunity funds. And believe me, those are very important. In the center of the financial planning pyramid, we address debt. We know, because we work with physicians, that many of you leave practice with debt, whether it be student loan debt, or some sort of credit card debt or other consumer debt that you've acquired. We always come up with a strategy to eliminate that. And so that is one of the first things, again, along the bottom that we address. The third area that is critical for our clients is risk management. And risk management really breaks out into two categories. The first is insurance. I am a huge proponent of insuring things that have great value. Income is one of them. I'm sure every one of you has been approached by any number of insurance people to talk to you about purchasing disability insurance. So disability insurance is certainly one of the things that we talk about with our clients, making sure that you have the right kind and that it keeps up with your income. For people who have families, for people who are thinking about having a family in the future, life insurance is something to think about. You're as young and probably as healthy as you're ever going to be. So this is a great time in your life to buy life insurance no matter where you're at. Another area that we talk about here is property and casualty insurance. And property and casualty insurance is your auto and home or renter's insurance, but more importantly, a liability umbrella. A lot of people have auto insurance, a lot of people have homeowners or renters insurance, but many people don't have a liability umbrella. For those of you who are affiliated with a larger institution or even in private practice, you have E&O insurance to protect you from something that happens in the OR. A liability umbrella is something that protects you away from the hospital. And what we know is that physicians who really experience issues related to their income or assets being attached are things that happen away from the hospital. And so a liability umbrella is something that goes over your auto or your home and renter's insurance and provides you with that extra layer of protection. Something I could go into in greater detail if we ever talk. The other category in the risk management section is estate planning. And I'm talking about basic estate planning. I meet with lots of clients, new clients who have children who don't even have a will or durable powers of attorney for healthcare and finance. And so that's something that we focus in on and help our clients obtain. Very important if you have children, obviously. You don't want the courts making decisions for you about who would get your children in the event that something would happen to you. And also, it is important for single people as well, depending on where you're at in your career. Every state has specific rules about what happens to your stuff if something happens to you and you don't have any direction provided. So risk management, debt management, cash management, fundamental planning concerns, things that we address right away with our clients. Moving up the ladder, or the pyramid, excuse me, this is where we talk about purchasing a home. For many people, buying a home is something that they want to do, and they want to do it soon. We're in a very unique time, as you probably know, particularly in California with we don't have a surplus of homes available, and we don't have a surplus of homes available that necessarily people would want to move right into. And if we do, those homes are very expensive. And now interest rates have gone up significantly in the last year, making it difficult to buy a home. As physicians, you are, from a bank or a lender's perspective, a very good client. And so there are lots of lenders in the marketplace who are willing to help physicians get into home for little or no down payment. And so this is a place where we help you talk about whether it makes sense to buy or rent, right? And then if it makes sense to buy, we actually do the legwork and help you go out and find the best lender in the marketplace. This is also a place where we talk about taxes. Jeannie knows this from our meetings. In almost every meeting, we talk about taxes and asset protection, right? Taxes, we live in California. Our tax burden is very high, not the highest in the country, but certainly high. And so we look at all the different ways that we can minimize our tax burden, right? We know that we need to pay our fair share. But there are strategies for minimizing taxes, not just now, but also in the future. If you work with a CPA, or if you will work with a CPA in the future, oftentimes CPAs are very concerned about getting you a tax deduction in a given year, but they're not looking out ahead. They're not doing tax projections. What are taxes going to be like in 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or when you potentially slow down or stop working? Those are the type of things that we look at, and as a result, we structure the investments accordingly. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. The other thing that we cover in this section of the planning process is once we've gotten our cash management section covered and we've identified the money that is available to set aside for some short or medium-term project, potentially buying a home, or for a longer-term concern like financial independence. Some people call retirement, some people call when work becomes optional. This is where I use the term, and I'm not a huge budget guy. I don't like budget. To me, budget is a 4-letter word. So instead, we talk about paying yourself first. And so we go through and we help you identify what percentage or what dollar amount of your income can we set aside so that you can address whatever debts you may have, whatever short or midterm goals you're trying to reach, and also living. I am one of those people who advocates very strongly with my clients that you shouldn't set everything aside for the future. I'm very much about enjoying the now and living for now and experiencing things along the way, long before we get to some age in the future. Retirement, right? This idea of when work becomes optional, financial independence. Many of our clients, for whatever reason, and I'm sure each of you can think of a number of reasons why someone would want to be done sooner rather than later. The pandemic, I think, has accelerated people's desire to have the ability to stop working. I think every one of the emergency medicine physicians that I work with is done and wants to be done right now. So we look at different investment opportunities depending on when you want to retire. There are certain tools that you can use pre-59 and a half, others that are not accessible to you until 59 and a half. Once an individual or a couple have achieved their own financial independence goals, this retirement or when work becomes optional, if they have children, this is when we start to talk about college. And college very specifically comes after retirement, because what we know to be true is that parents who have positioned themselves well financially are much better able to help their children. And not everyone wants to help their children with college, right? There are people who have put themselves through college covered their own medical school costs, and they're like, my kids are going to do the exact same thing. Then there are other people who've had that experience and they don't want their kids to have that experience. But there are tools that we can use to help you prepare for college, things that are specifically designated for college, and then other tools that allow you to keep the money in your name so that if you don't need it for college, you don't need to do anything. Alternative investments, something that I'm going to go into a little bit more, is something that we don't even think about until those other areas are addressed. Meaning, I don't want my clients to be looking at unique investment opportunities until their retirement, till college, till some of these savings goals for the short and medium term have been addressed, to even think about alternative investments. And there are qualifications that you have to reach to even talk about alternative investments with clients, depending on their net worth or their income. I am going to talk a little bit more about alternative investments because that is a real hot topic for our clients. And many of you may have already been talking about this or heard about this. As we move up the pyramid, advanced estate planning is something that people do when they've got more than they need, or they want to make sure that they are taking care of people or institutions that speak to them, whether it be philanthropic or academic, right? And they want to be able to bestow gifts. There are other things that fall into that category. If you go into private practice and you become a partner in some sort of a surgery center or a partnership, advanced estate planning is necessary. The next thing in the pyramid, and really this is when you know you've arrived, is when you have this money that is excess that you can actually think about giving away. You can give it away during your lifetime or when you pass. And so those are the different areas that we cover. And we believe that once you've reached, right, any of those post-college, you're really at financial independence. The alternative investments, the advanced estate planning, the giving may or may not be right for every client. And it might not be right for every client now, right, depending on where you're at in your career. But eventually it'll be something that you'll want to think about. I'm going to stop talking about the pyramid for a minute. I've just talked for a very long time. Does anyone have questions about the financial planning process, the process that we take our clients through, or the financial planning pyramid in general? No questions?
I think you can keep going.
I'm sorry, Jeannie, go ahead.
I think you can keep going. I bet everyone's busy eating.
Pizza. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about alternative investments. And the reason, again, that I want to talk about alternative investments is clients, and you may have seen this in the OR. We hear from our clients often about different investments that they heard about, right, while they were sitting in the OR. I have some anesthesiologists in my practice, and every once in a while I'll get a text from the anesthesiologist, right, that they were just in the OR and they heard about this great investment opportunity, and what do I think about it, right? It seems that anesthesiologists have a little bit more time in the OR than the surgeons to be texting, because I don't get that many texts from my surgeons. The alternative investments is really a broad category that includes anything outside what we would call the public markets. So when you think about public markets, think about the S&P 500, right, or the Dow Jones, these indices that we hear about when people are talking about the markets, right? How are the markets doing? So public markets are either companies that are publicly traded or bonds that are available to the public from the US government, from international governments, from municipalities, or even corporate bonds, okay? And every one of those particular investments has a risk associated with it. And generally speaking, the more risk that you take in the market, or even with private investments, the more return you should expect. This is such a hot topic, and our clients are asking about it so much that it has been on our radar for a very long time. And we have continued to, as the barriers to entry for alternative investments have dissipated, been able to make more and more private investment strategies available to our clients. Now, private investment strategies are just generally, you are getting access to investments in privately held companies, either by loaning privately held companies money, by leasing privately held companies space, or actually buying into privately held companies. One of the reasons why this is so important is that, you know, I've been doing this for 22 years, it'll be 23 years, much too soon. And in that time frame, the number of companies that are publicly held has continued to decline. And the number of companies that are privately held has continued to increase. Companies are foregoing this term called IPO, right, or an initial public offering, where they use an investment bank and then they offer their stock on a market to investors. And they're going directly to venture capital. And so in order for us to continue to have a diversified portfolio, we really need to make sure that we are including private investment strategies in our portfolios. Many investment professionals are charging 1% or higher, right, for simply advising on public markets. This concerns me, and so this is an area I know where a lot more people are becoming aware of public versus private, and so we charge actually quite a bit less to manage public markets because we don't believe that we add 1% or more value to a public portfolio. Private investments, on the other hand, are much more complicated and require a lot more of our time to help manage. So, excuse me. So there are two different types of private investments. And just real quickly, there are private investments that I would recommend that you include in a portfolio, even a retirement portfolio. Monies that you are setting aside for long-term goals. There are certain private investments that I'm very comfortable recommending because the risk return is similar to the risk return that you would have just in the market generally, okay? There are other types of private investments that I would only recommend to someone who really wants to take some money and just try to knock it out of the park, right? Like, you know, take 50,000 and hope that it's worth $1 million in 10 years, right? Now, there aren't a lot of opportunities like that, but there are some. And the only time that I recommend those are with money that people could afford to lose that would not affect their ability to reach their financial independence goal, okay? I want to get just a little bit more specific here, and then I'm going to change topics. But if you look at private investments as part of your retirement portfolio, there are 4 different categories of private investments that are I'd be very comfortable recommending that you include in your portfolio. One of them is private credit. It's where you're loaning money to privately held companies. Triple net leases, that is where you're basically leasing space to privately held companies. And triple net, when it comes to a lease, just means that the tenant pays all the expenses, okay? And then there are secondary private equity funds and private real estate funds. Those are, from a risk reward perspective, they still fall into what we would be comfortable with in a retirement portfolio. Now you'll see over to the far right for these surplus funds that private equity funds, venture capital funds, or startups, for example, these are the types of investments that I mentioned where I would only want a client to use these if it was money that they could afford to lose. Now, if you're just getting started in practice, or if you haven't even gone into practice yet, right? Like you're probably like, what? There's money that I can afford to lose. We'll get there. You'll get there, and there are good reasons to take advantage of some of these. There is a health and tech fund, for example, that a number of my clients have invested in, that I've personally invested in, that while it falls into that surplus fund only category, the probability that you would lose all your money is negligible. So while it is risky, the probability that you would lose all your money is negligible. So again, if any of you have interest in any of these topics, I'm happy to go into more detail offline. So I'm going to stop private investments, private capital for a second. Any questions about private capital, private markets versus public markets? Is anybody hearing about this?
We don't really talk about money in surgery.
Jeannie, that's so funny because that is not what I hear from so many of your friends and colleagues. That actually comes up in surgery. Maybe it's in different.
I don't think there's that many trainees that actually talk about these things on a day-to-day basis.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I understand that. So if for people who are just going out into practice or who are going to be going out into practice, that pyramid that I went through at the beginning, there are so many layers to the pyramid that you should be talking to someone like me about long before you should be talking about private capital. There are so many things that I helped Jeannie with 11 plus years ago, right? That are not the things that we're talking about in our meetings today. And so I don't want you to think that just because I talked about one of the most advanced sort of planning topics that we can't deal with foundational stuff. We deal with foundational stuff all the time. So another hot topic and something that I think every physician needs to think about when it comes to investments is, what is your overall investment strategy and how are you dealing with your investments? And this is whether you're single or whether you're partnered, married in some way. And there are various accounts that you're going to have access to, that you have access to probably now in some form or fashion, that has different tax treatment. And it is very important that you utilize all 3 of these different tax some people call them tax buckets. Clearly, this slide shows them as a funnel. The point of this is that there are investments that you can make now where you get a tax break. They grow tax deferred, and then you pay taxes on them in the future. Conversely, there are investments that you can make now. You've already paid taxes on them. They grow tax deferred, and you never pay taxes again. Those are the best ones. I'd love it if every investment I have was that way. I know Jeannie would feel the same way. And then there are investments that are taxable, and they're smart. You've got to have investments that are accessible to you now. Most of those tax deferred or tax advantaged post-tax type investments, those are things that you can't get at until later in life. But the taxable investments are things that are available to you now. And there's all different types. There's some that have almost no risk, and there are some that are very risky. And so the thing that I want to bring to your attention on this particular slide is no matter who you end up working with, right? Whether it's a financial planner or an investment professional, they should be talking to you about tax treatment, because taxes are going to be one of the biggest issues for you as you go out into practice. And depending on the type of practice that you go into, if you go into private practice, you're going to have a whole new set of tax issues. We help a lot of people with their own corporations who do work directly for an institution and get paid as an independent contractor, right? There are lots of different tax strategies that are available to those people. There are people that go into partnerships and have access to surgery centers, right? To buying into surgery centers. Those are things that we evaluate and talk with our clients about all the time. There are people who have jobs that they get paid a paycheck, a W-2 paycheck. They're simply an employee. They have, not as many tax benefits or things that we can do to minimize their tax burden, but there are some. The best situation for many people is to have W-2 income, so you get benefits, but then to do some independent contractor work, whether it's locums, if you have, if you can do both. Not every employer will allow that. But to think about, how can I earn, right, and do different things to minimize my tax burden based on the types of income that I receive. So it's not just your income, but it's also your investments. And how do I best put the different investments that I have into these different categories? And the one thing that I always talk to people about is if you have a bunch of bonds in your portfolio and then you have all of these very aggressive investments like emerging markets, there's very specific places that we should hold those. And if you're married or partnered in some way and you're looking to fund financial independence together, we should be looking at your entire portfolio as one. And there are lots of efficiencies from a tax perspective that we can generate just by looking at all of your accounts as one, not these disparate Roth IRA over here, 401k or 403b, deferred compensation, whatever the account. If we look at them all as one, we can save you a lot of money long term. All right. Those were the two topics that I wanted to cover. I get the impression that there are a lot more people that are new in practice or have not yet gone out into practice, maybe who are in residency or fellowship. And so I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to ask any questions or questions about anything I've presented.
Anybody have any questions? I have one. So Forrest, for those of us, the majority of people in your audience right now are trainees, what's the one thing you think they should do now to kind of get them on the road to retirement?
Jean, if you could repeat that one more time, there was noise in the room.
there is one thing you would advise trainees to do now, like just the one thing, if there's one thing they could do, what would that be?
The one thing that I would advise a trainee to do right now is to find someone who they can begin working with during training, who they can get to know and trust before they make the jump into practice. And the reason why I say that is there are many firms, many advisors, planners, investment professionals who have zero interest in talking to you right now because you don't have any money. There are financial firms, financial planners like our firm who are very interested in talking with residents and fellows because it gives us an opportunity to get to know you and for you to get to know us and understand how we work and develop a rapport so that when you make the move into practice, you're much more comfortable that that firm, whether it's us or someone else, has your best interests, right? You already trust them. And so I would say that's probably the most important thing I would recommend, Jeannie. And there are other things that, people like us can do. I actually know the difference between an RVU and collection income. I actually know what makes up an RVU. And so I can actually look at your contract or contracts that might be presented to you and talk to you about the pros and cons. We can even run that up against different salaries from MGMA or AMGA or any of the different organizations that provide financial data. So I would encourage you to think about finding someone now that you can get to know so that when you are making more money, you trust them with the decisions that they're making. After that, I think the next thing that I would say, Jeannie, is, I know that you've all been approached by somebody, right, to purchase disability insurance. Disability insurance policies are not all created equal. There are insurance professionals who work maybe for one of those particular companies, and you don't usually need the most expensive policy. So I would encourage you to get disability insurance in some form or fashion, even if it's not a lot, if it doesn't fit into the budget, but has a big pool of benefit that you can use in the future without ever having to go back through medical underwriting. I would think about that very strongly. And I would find somebody who doesn't represent a company. I would find somebody who has no attachment to a particular insurance company. And then, again, you're all in California, and this is not a cheap place to live. And so I don't know how much room you have in your budget, but you should be thinking about using a Roth IRA if you can, even if it's a couple $100 a month, because a Roth IRA is something that that we may not always have access to. There was talk for a while of doing away even with the backdoor Roth, which is something that allows people in higher incomes to continue to make Roth contributions through this mechanism called the backdoor Roth. That money is after tax, and you will never be taxed on it again. And so if you think about the number of years between now and when you're actually going to slow down or stop working, the ability for that to grow over time and never be taxable again is significant to you.
I have a couple of questions for us that came in the chat.
Yeah.
The first one being, how much does it cost to work with a financial advisor?
Mm-hmm. So, I think every financial advisor charges differently. So if you are a resident or a fellow and you are interested in working with our firm, for example, we usually will take a small fee while you are in training, and then charge the remainder of the fee at the when you go out into practice, right? So we'll start helping you, preparing you, doing everything that we would do for somebody in practice, but we won't charge you until you actually start to get that big paycheck, because many thousands of dollars, right, is not something that most residents and fellows have access to pay someone like me right now. And we believe so strongly that we can help you so much during that transition from training to practice that we're willing to just take a small deposit now and some agreement that we'll work together in the future. There are, and I will say this, there are people who will tell you that they will provide you with a great deal of service for little or no money, or they will provide you with financial planning services, but they'll just charge you a percentage to manage your money. It's been my experience that people who don't actually charge for financial planning and then charge separately for investment management don't do the extensive financial planning that firms like ours do. So I would find somebody who charges you for financial planning, their time and their expertise, and someone who charges you separately for money management. If they're bundled together, it's been my experience that the focus is on investments, and there'll be less of a focus on that pyramid and making sure that all those other things are taken care of.
Okay, I have 3 more questions in the chat.
Yeah.
And this one I will ask just as it's written. Are you advising trainees that the PSLF program is going to be around long enough for current trainees with student debt to take advantage of it?
We're not advising people that it will exist. We're making sure that people who have access to it now are taking advantage of it, and we're making sure that people who could potentially qualify for the PSLF program are setting up their student loans in such a way that they will get credit for non-payment, right? Because we've been in this deferment for a long time, that we're capturing these quarters, right? Because you have to pay or not pay in deferment, for so many years before you actually qualify. I think that I don't have a crystal ball, right? And I have a very strong feeling about which particular political party is going to be more PSLF friendly. So depending on how the future plays out politically, particularly in the executive branch, hopefully it will be around, and we know how to help our clients position themselves to take advantage of it. We advise our clients on that all the time. Right now, we just helped a bunch of in-practice physicians who had no idea they qualified for get forgiveness for tens of thousands, and I've got a couple clients who are getting hundreds and hundreds of thousands. So of forgiveness.
I'm sorry, Forrest. I'm not sure if I interrupted another question that somebody was trying to ask outside of the chat. So if that was the case, if you could chime back in, and then I do have 2 more chat questions.
We can probably skip the Roth IRA one because he answered that while everything's tight. But the last
skip the Roth IRA question. Is that what you recommended?
I think he answered that one. I think he feels it was important, and that was basically the question.
Okay.
And the last one is there a percentage gross income you generally recommend setting aside for retirement?
Yes, but, and here's the but part. Right after I meet with a prospective client and we make a decision about whether we're a good fit for each other, we don't take every person that comes to us, right? There are people that aren't a good fit for us, and we're not a good fit for them, right? For whatever reason. But right after that meeting where we decide that we're going to work together, the next meeting is a meeting where we talk to our new client about what is important to them. And I think you'll find that if you do work with us, that not very many people do this. This is very unique to our organization. And for some people, it's a little touchy-feely. So if you don't like touchy-feely, Jeannie, did you do this? Did we ever do this? I can't remember.
We did.
Yeah. So some people find it a little touchy-feely, right? So like if you don't like to talk about, what you're passionate about, or, what makes you smile or what doesn't make you smile, we can tone it down for you. I am very much interested in knowing what my clients are passionate about so that I can really advise them well. So that, this idea that somehow you should save X percentage or X dollar amount of your income for the future, right? For financial independence or when work becomes optional, it might not make sense for you. It might not make sense for you because you are single and you want to stay single. If you're single and you want to stay single, the need to save as much for the future is different than it would be for someone who's partnered with children, right? So no, I can't give you an arbitrary number. And I think there are so many different variables. Like, are you gonna stay in California, or are you gonna go to Iowa, right? You're gonna go to North Dakota, because if you're gonna go to North Dakota, you're gonna get paid a pile of money, right? But you're going to have to live in North Dakota. No offense to North Dakota, but it's cold, right? So like there are there's so many different variables, I guess, is my point. What was the question? Somebody was asking a question verbally, not in the chat. I didn't want to miss that.
I think it was Dr. Reese. I don't know if he's still on. I thought it sounded like Jeff. No?
It was me. So hi, Forrest. Thanks for giving this talk. I'm the one who asked the question on how much do you cost, and I can be more direct about it. But so at UCSD, we have free sessions through Fidelity that we can like sign up for and get a free sort of financial advisor. Yeah. And I'm with them, and they sort of spoke in these global terms, and I know there's all these global terms that I sort of vaguely understand. But what does it actually mean for me? Like, what should I actually do with my money? It's not something that they ever did or helped with, but it was free. So I met with them. Sure. And so I'm just wondering how much for a resident to actually get somebody like you on board? How much would that cost in a dollar amount, so that I know if it's maybe that's worth it, that we should go outside and sit down with somebody who has this pyramid picture to help us from the get-go. And I know all your fees are going to change and everything, but I was just wondering how much it actually costed.
Sure. So, if you were sitting in front of me and you were saying, Forrest, I want to work with you, how much does it cost? Here's the answer. The answer is that I would take a $500 deposit. Where are you at in your training? How much time do you have left before you go out into practice?
I have 2 years of residency and 1 year of fellowship.
Okay, so basically you would get a lot of free time from us because we would take a deposit now and we would charge you the difference when you go out into practice. I am $6,000 a year. So if you want to work minimum, so if you want to work with me and my team, it would be a $500 deposit. We would meet with you a couple initial meetings to get you sort of set with some of those fundamental things that I talked about on the pyramid. And then we would be available to you educationally. I'm a big I love education. So I probably spend much more time with my clients teaching because I like to do that. I do that internally as well. So you would have the opportunity to spend time with me or someone on my team to learn more about a particular topic. And then when you go out into practice and you've got your signed contract and you start to get paid, we'll give you some period of time there to pay me the balance of that $6,000. And then we would move into whatever fee arrangement we came up with when you stay in practice. So to be clear, you would pay $500 now. Your first year in practice, you would pay the balance, the $5,500, right? And then we would discuss fees 3 years from now.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. And what was the Roth IRA question? I'm happy to answer it real quick if I didn't cover it all in detail.
Is something like a Roth IRA a must for residents at all levels? Do you think it's worth investing money when there's very little room in the budget? I think you answered that.
Yeah, and I think, again, here's what I would say to that. I am a huge proponent of the Roth IRA, just like I'm a huge proponent of disability insurance, because you're protecting your most valuable asset, right? It's your ability to earn an income. I'm also a huge proponent of Roth IRAs because it's money that you're never going to have to pay taxes on again. But if it's the difference between paying down your credit card at 16%, right? Or if it's the difference between, having to take out a consumer loan to do fellowship, to do interviews while you're in fellowship, no, you shouldn't be contributing to the Roth IRA, right? We should be looking at your financial situation. And I say this to everyone, right? Like, I can give you these sort of general financial opinions or thoughts that I may have, but that does not mean they apply to your situation. And so I would encourage you to talk to someone. I'd be happy to talk to each one of you. Each one of you can arrange a time to speak with me gratis. And if you want to work with me going forward, great. If you don't, fine too. I'm more than happy to talk to you. That time that we spend together, that 30 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever we talk, when we talk and I learn a little bit more about your particular situation, I'm going to be much better able to answer specific questions about your situation. And then if you want to work with me, great. If not, you've got more information for whenever you do decide to work with someone or do it on your own.
Anybody have any other questions? I know we're going over time. I want to thank Forrest for joining us today. This is really, I think for me it was really useful, even though you already took my money. But I think I hope for the residents this was especially helpful. And if you guys want his information, let me know. I can give it to you. I can send you his email so you can email him and his associates. And so you guys can set up a time. Again, I'm not sponsored. I happen to know Forrest because he's my financial planner. It was easy to ask him and try to find someone new. So, all right. If there's nothing else, thank you, Forrest. Thank you, Sarah, for setting this up.
Absolutely. Thanks to everybody.
See you guys later.
Take care, Jeannie. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Forrest.